Okay, and we are being recorded. All right. Welcome to the May 30th edition of this OpenJS Foundation Standards Working Group meeting. We've got a lovely crew as usual here with us today, working from issue number 234 in the standards repo. If you happen to click in and follow along with the notes, that would be swell. Announcements, I don't really have any immediate announcements. The only thing I was just going to share is because I was out for the May 16 meeting, unplanned absence. I'm just going through the notes, and the recording is on YouTube now, but the notes document isn't quite ready yet. So that's that. And then Robin, we have maybe a couple of OpenJS meetings this week. Is there CPC meeting today? Or did that already happen?
A working group meeting today. We have program committee tomorrow where the group is working already, scoring the CFPs that came in through Europe. So that's pretty cool. That's about it, I think, on the meeting front.
Anybody else have any other just announcements before we get into, I guess I do want to say welcome to Leo. Kuna from the Kuriki team has joined us today. Welcome, Leo.
Thank you.
Hey, Leo.
Yeah, so no other announcements. We will go into liaison
I guess,
updates.
I mean,
oh, go ahead.
just so last time we met, I think was in the middle of the TC39 meeting. So I didn't really talk about PC39. Hemant again put out one of his summaries, which I would refer to. I don't have the link offhand, but a number of things changed stage. Decorator metadata went to stage 3, which joins regular decorators. Array grouping dropped back down to stage 2, and I took over, or not took over, I joined on as a champion because the prototype methods were not web compatible. So I'm going to try and bring them back in the next meeting as static methods. And then a number of proposals went to stage 2, promise.with resolvers. So it's like the deferred pattern. And then a time zone canonicalization proposal, which I'm not going to pretend I understand, but is very important for temporal stuff and internationalization. And then there's let's see, float 16 array went to stage 3. The V flag for regular expressions went to stage 4, as did atomics.wait async and well-formed Unicode strings. And yeah, and then an Intel proposal went to stage 1. So that was all the advancement. And then the link for Hemant's summary is in the Zoom chat. That's all.
Awesome. Sounds like a lot of things for our community to check out, and a lot of there was like 2 or 3 that you noted went to stage 4.
Yeah, 3 of them, but the stage 3 is the more interesting time because that's when they're going to become shipped in browsers.
Yeah.
By stage 4, they've already been out for a while, and like Babel already supports them and so on.
Yeah, I think stage 4 is also one that we should celebrate because
sure,
it's it's like, so that's cool. Congrats to all of the champions for those. It's a pretty big deal. Yeah. Cool. So TC53, we have Donovan Buck, but he is not here, and I think they also had a plenary last week, so we'll just grab him next time. Leah, anything from the W3C land, W3C tag that you want to report on today from?
Nothing particularly significant, I don't think.
Cool.
I have one W3C update. We're working on a security workshop with W3C and OWASP. We had our program committee this morning. We're talking about rescheduling to September 26th through the 28th. There's an open issue if y'all want to comment on that, but looking at trying to find a time that works for a lot of folks. That is Open Source Summit China, but it would be virtual. But we're also looking at having some in-person pre-planning meetups at Open Source Summit and the W3C meeting. Is it TPAC in Sevilla? Yeah.
What days did you say was the new?
September 26th through the 28th. So that is the proposal with 3 2-hour sessions. So 7 to 9 a.m. Pacific, 10 to noon Eastern, 3 to 5 UK, 4 to 6 Toby time, and then 5 to 7 Tel Aviv.
Right.
If you have feedback
I
on those dates, there's an open issue Toby time.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that Jordan actually gets that in the TC39, the internationalization effort on time zones that he was talking
you
about.
Sneak it in somewhere.
I'd appreciate that.
Mhm.
Awesome. And then we do not have Emily here from Unicode. And then that next one would be OSI. And I understand from our last call that I was catching up that Toby is going to be stepping into Phil Miles' shoes. We have to do some things to make that official, but I guess just to get it in our regular liaison updates. Toby, any updates from OSI this?
Well, no.
Yeah.
Precisely because like, I don't have access to the mailing list yet. But there are, there's a very, very, very important set of topics around legislation in the EU and in the US. And so there are things happening around this. But nothing more concrete than that. I'm working actually on a presentation for upstream on the topic. So it's something to keep an eye on, because it's potentially a big negative deal depending on what happens where.
And then Toby, you'd also put in chat, the IEEE has a governance group that's chaired, I think, by Stephen Wally. Is this the group that you're referring to?
Yeah, so long story short, and this kind of ties into, we have an open issue on the CPC about sort of like the governance model of the foundation and how that differs from other kind of governance models of like vendor driven or BDFL, et cetera. And there was a pretty large effort to do a large standard on open source governance at IEEE. And this is kind of imploding right now because there's like some difficulty between the different expectations around process. And so essentially there's some regrouping happening, and it's probably going to move outside of IEEE is my expectation, maybe around the work that the Eclipse Foundation and OSPO Zone and OSPO Plus and OW2 have been running. So just a heads up that there is, some governance, some plans to organize, to sort of like standardize on governance and terminology around it. And that was supposed to happen at IEEE. It's probably going to happen somewhere else.
So, I mean, we don't have a liaison relationship with IEEE. I would say maybe worth just kind of keeping tabs on how that project progresses, but probably not something at the moment that we want to, I don't know. My gut is that there's some, it's maybe kind of noise as it connects to us, right, at this juncture in time. Like maybe, I don't know, maybe or maybe it is relevant to the CPC. That's maybe something to figure out.
My perspective is there's an open issue on the topic for which it is sort of slightly relevant, but it's going to take a while until there's a new direction and structure and organization around us. And so I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Mhm.
But it's more like, for your information, in case some of you were aware of this or tracking it, essentially, there was a good energy and it stalled for process reasons. And that's sort of like stalled momentum. And it's kind of like folks are trying to regroup and figure out how to handle it.
Yeah.
Are there any lessons we might get from what stalled it? Any patterns there that might apply to other communities?
That's a
So,
great question.
I mean, I
But
had a
Jory, please.
conversation with Stephen about it 2 weeks ago, and this was just sort of a casual coffee talk, but he kind of, so I wouldn't want to say too much, but he kind of just referred to the fact that IEEE in this particular space where they're working, very formal standards kind of process and systems, but the work of this particular group was not meant to sort of be that, like, yes, we would, the group would eventually come up with a standard for terms and things of that nature, but it didn't necessarily require the same overhead. And so I think he sort of referenced more of the kind of cultural distinction between the open source C style approach of many of the participants of this group compared to the very process heavy technical standards system that IEEE has for this sort of activity, and those things being somewhat at odds. That's in places, and that's I think all I'll say about that. But I don't know, Toby, if that resonates. You've been on this call a lot more than I have.
I mean, I think to answer Michael's question, being clear upfront about IP questions, being clear upfront about what it is that you're trying to do, being clear upfront about working modes before you decide to go in a specific environment to work on something is a good thing, and should have been probably done with more due diligence before getting down that road. So that's kind of like my lesson from that is really that one is like there are places where it makes sense to work on certain stuff and places where it makes sense to work on other stuff. And to some degree, it's kind of like you pick the place that matters for what you're trying to achieve. And I think it was a real mismatch there that should have been figured out like way, way earlier than that.
All right. Oh, need to promote Darcy. Sorry, Darcy. Okay, so that brings us, I think, through the, unless there's any other comments on that, those are all of our liaison updates for today.
Can I say just a tiny thing about like a tiny second point about this? I think it's important.
Sure.
Small standards, like focus on standardizing small things, not like trying to do all aspects of open source in one standard, because that's just like too much work. Like, standardize like the URL, not like the the whole shebang.
+1 million. All right. Okay, that gets us through announcements and liaison updates. Now on to our regularly scheduled agenda items. Just going to take a second and because I know we've got some newer folks here. You can add anything to the agenda by opening an issue on the standards repo and then adding the label standards-agenda. So feel free, if there's something you want to discuss in the future or even now, just open up an issue, and this will help us sort of track that stuff. So that's that, just as an FYI. Issue 232 is the AB election ballot that is due on Thursday. I was watching and listening and reading the report from last week. So I know that Mike Champion and Brian and Toby have already kind of led a general conversation here. So the action that I'm going to take is go take a look at the votes from last time and submit our ballot, and mostly just reaffirm who we chose in the prior election. But I'll update the working group chat in Slack, and y'all can let me know if you had any recommended changes. But the list that I have in the agenda, and I will pop that actually in Zoom chat here, is generally my order based on my memory of our last ballot, but I can go look that up. So unless there's anything else, I'll move on to the next agenda topic.
Curious if Elika's change in affiliation to Apple had any effect at all on your thinking.
Well, you know how I feel about Elika. I think very highly of her. I think she is the cat's pajamas. I also think very highly of Chris Wilson.
Wait, no, you owe me $1, first of all. Because I don't know what that idiom is. And we have a rule, and that rule still works.
The cat's pajamas is not a cross-cultural. Where did you grow up, Toby?
In Geneva, Switzerland.
Oh, really? So
Is the bee's knees also equally regional?
Listen, I owe Toby like $100 at this point. Is the problem?
Was that the compound interest? It's a lot
Right.
more actually at this point.
Anyway, I don't know where. I'm gonna have to look it up later. I don't know where that idiom came from. It just
You
means
don't
that I
even know
like
what
her.
it means, do you?
No.
Oh, okay.
oh, yeah, it means the greatest. I mean the
Yeah.
Yeah,
sine qua non.
the
It's
best.
a positive thing. It's a thing that
Yeah.
means that you like somebody. It's a
Yeah.
good thing to be the cat's pajamas. Anyway, but I also know that Chris's affiliation with Google. Chris has done some amazing work as well on the advisory council, and has really put in a lot of time and effort. But I know that he gets docked because he's a Googler, and that is something I'm just trying to counterbalance a little bit. So I think Toby and then Leah.
I just want to point out that again, that voting STV mechanism really means that you really get essentially to choose one, and so order matters.
Elika won't have any trouble getting votes. Chris will.
Yep.
And even Apple just isn't hated as much as Google is, so it's not going to hurt her.
I wouldn't say this for almost anybody else, but specifically for Elika, I'm pretty confident that whoever company she joins, she will not drink the Kool-Aid of that company. And
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And her priorities will be aligned with what's best for the web and what's best for standards and W3C. And I can't think of many people I would say this for, but Elika is definitely one of them.
That's a strong vote of confidence.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, and Chris, for all the crap he gets, is a real voice of reason within Google, trying to keep them from, going totally, down the road they have been going on since they dropped. Don't be evil.
Another thing I wanted to say, I forgot, is I would avoid voting in the strategically in the sense of, oh, this person's going to get plenty of votes, so we don't need to put them first, because this doesn't always work, because if everybody thinks that way, then nobody ends up voting for that person. Like, see what happened with Alice in the tag election. Everybody thought that, oh, Alice will definitely get in. Of course, it's very obvious that we need Alice. And then she ended up not getting elected because I guess everybody assumed the same thing.
STB is
That
also
a
weird.
good point.
So this is just as you guys noted last time, hopefully a reconfirmation in many ways. And there's 8 people running for 6 positions, so 2 people are not going to be happy, but yeah, I think generally our preferred candidates, I hope, are all gonna make that 6 slot, have a role in those 6, one of those 6 spots. And STV voting. Am I right? All right. Moving on to next items. Skip down really quick to hopefully some additional ones that we can bang out really quickly. The TPAC also discussed last week. I know 3 folks from our community are planning to, at least 3 folks from our community are planning to be at TPAC in Spain. The question is whether one of those 3 or all 3 of those 3 folks would be interested in proposing a breakout session for that Wednesday. And granted, that does sort of come together more quickly closer to the event, but I think that is something that we should consider, especially given Leia's recent report from the tag and how to get more open source developers sort of weighing in. And I think that's a space where OpenJS proposing a breakout session along those lines could be really, really effective. I would like for us to do this. I would not like to go to Spain, but if I have to go to Spain to do that, I would do it. Thoughts?
We should work on the topic.
Yeah.
Because I think like that's what's, and what kind of outcomes we would want to have. I mean, those breakout sessions tend to be super technical, as you know, like really, focused on like very sort of like, and so I remember you having lots of success driving sort of like some open source standard kind of bridge. So, I mean, I think we should work on the topic. I'm probably going to go. If I go and we have a topic, I'm happy to help run it or whatnot. But we do want to have something to actually talk about.
I agree. And I think you're spot on that it should be sort of outcome oriented. But, again, I'm just thinking more about like that bridge building, which I think like Brian Cardell and I, like a couple before the pandemic, a long time ago, did one. We may have done that 2 years in a row. And I just feel like they did well in that people came and they were excited and they wanted to like further learn from us. But we're now at the point where we have to kind of do something a lot more specific than just remind people that like open source exists or that we should do things together. It's now like we're kind of at that point where we have to go, what's next here.
Yeah, I think the concrete problem is sort of in the standardization process, the requirement for multiple interoperable, independently built interoperable implementations, which for increasingly number of things, when there's only one open source implementation, And people feel good about that because the open source project is reasonably, broadly, diverse and openly governed and blah, blah, blah. I mean, my thinking is W3C should accommodate that reality. There are some people, and Tantec is one of them. Well, it partly gets into the strategic issues of those who compete with Chromium don't want to give, don't want to start down the slippery slope of basically making Chromium the standards organization. So it's where people might be expected to agree in principle that open source implementations, that meet certain criteria should sort of count as interoperable, even if there's only one basic source tree. Anyway, it's a tricky and nuanced issue that I think we could, or our community could, be a positive voice in, but we have to navigate some tricky political waters, basically created by, Chromium's increasing role as the de facto standard for the web platform.
I think that Toby's right. That's a huge can of worms that we should open. Let me just say that. I think, give me the can opener. Let's go. Because
so, I have made non-friends by slightly hinting at the fact that at some point it might be good to eventually agree to start a conversation to talk about this topic. So yeah, I mean, this is like, not only is it the biggest can of worms ever, it's also like the hugest, biggest elephant in the room, right?
People talk to me about it in my role. You know what? So.
Well, what if we thought about bringing like Robert Nyman, or because those folks, or Philip, or like some of the folks from the Chromium kind of, if we brought them along in that conversation.
Yeah, so I am gently removing myself from this conversation.
Okay.
Right this minute.
All right, got it.
No, it's an important conversation, but it's a highly contentious conversation for a whole bunch of obvious reasons and a whole bunch of non-obvious reasons. I don't know how to have this conversation in a way that doesn't create like a huge amount of like non-useful contention. If that wasn't, if there's an angle to have this conversation or to open a conversation around this, then it could be really interesting. But there's so much, like there's identity tied to the different, like there's so much going on there. It's very, very complicated. I don't think like that setting, especially like I don't think an external body bringing that conversation inside of W3C is going to be well received. That's my other concern.
But we're not an external body, we're a member. And a lot of us have long history in W3C. And I think more to the point, they're ignoring the elephant in the room in a lot of these, because there's a lot of formal objections that back in the, so let me back up. In the dawn of time, Tim Berners-Lee was the benevolent dictator of W3C. And when there were judgment calls to be made, he made them. You can agree or not with his calls, but he made them. Now it is essentially political process, or something called a formal objection council that gets created from the TAG and the AB, and then there's a bunch of wrangling about who should recuse themselves, and I don't know. I find it a total mess, but the wiser people than I agreed to it. So, but anyway, without actual language in the process guiding how people are to make the judgment call about whether there's sufficient interoperable, independent implementation experience. It's just going to be a political mess every time somebody objects. So I think there is a need to have a fairly, well, there's a need to not just ignore the elephant in the room and keep arguing about the instances without agreement on the principles. Not that I disagree with Toby that it's going to be a mess, and if I had a career, I wouldn't want it to have anything to do with that mess, but I don't.
Why don't you come to Spain, Michael? I mean, I'll cheer in the room.
Well,
Definitely.
there's something to be said for that. I mean, because, but yeah, it's not really aligned with my personal priorities these days. But yeah, I mean, I walked this road at Microsoft as they went from, oh no, we can't be involved in open source, so we are going to double down on standards. And then they sort of, they're now at the other end, and while they barely pay attention in W3C as far as I can tell. So anyway, I like to be part of the conversation. Not sure I want to go to Spain to be the the front person.
Other shame.
But yeah.
So it sounds like on this, what I'm going to do is just as to bring it to action. I'm going to take the standards label, agenda label off of this issue because we don't need to bring it up every meeting. But I'm going to ask Toby, myself, Michael Champion, and anybody else who wants to talk about that can of worms to discuss a little bit. Yes, I'll put that label on the issue. Good idea. Can of worms
label.
And
Which
can.
is different from the cat's pajamas. It's the other end of the spectrum.
I know. How is there not $1 involved in this, Toby? Come on.
So we'll talk about it, and then probably won't be until like August that we need to kind of decide if that's something we want to do. So we'll relabel and discuss further in Slack. All right. The last, hopefully very quick hit, just to confirm, because it didn't I didn't have a ton of time to watch all of the meeting from last week. Sounds like we had agreement from this group to make Toby the new OSI rep, with the understanding that Toby will focus on bringing the OpenJS communities into the policy discussions that OSI tend to take a leadership role on, and that the action here is really for us to figure out, Toby, I suppose, what we need to do to let the OSI know that you're our delegate now. Is there anything else that you need to make that happen, and to, other than, yeah?
I mean, I was going to reach out, but I wanted the pull request to be merged, and I actually don't have. It has been approved enough times, but I don't have merge rights on this repository. And then, like, a week and a half passed, I was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to wait for Tuesday. And so essentially that's what I was waiting for, and I'm just going to ping them and ask them like what to do. I imagine there's like a mailing list they have to put me on.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. After this meeting, I will take notes so it's clear that this was the side, and merge your PR and go from there. Okay. All right, so that's 224. That'll be done. And now on to the remaining bigger substantive issues. 233 was also discussed during the last meeting. That is the part of the meeting and the recording that I have not had a chance to watch yet, and because I didn't have notes to follow. This is 233 to discuss package.json standardization and governance. I suspect Darcy, Jordan, a number of you were probably really active in that call. And I will go back and I will finish watching this and all that sort of thing, but I want to make sure that we're tracking next steps, action items, like what the status is. So does anybody want to do me a solid and summarize so that I can put that in?
I was not in
Close
that
to another
call.
dollar.
Oh, yeah.
I was not in that call. Unfortunately, I missed that call, but I've been following up at least in a Word doc that I see Toby and Ethan have been working on. I think generally trying to round out like the problem space. So I think Jordan's comment in the thread, we really want to ask the question first: does standardization make sense? I saw Leah, your comment as well about, you know, this might be the perfect opportunity to bring this to like a body like W3C as well in that thread. But yeah, I don't think there's been really any updates here. I made the comment that we need to have folks from NPM join this discussion because technically that's the origin of that file and format. Is NPM Inc. and so you might want to tread lightly there. There's definitely the SPIDX folks, or however you say that, SPDX folks.
I say SPIDX. I don't know.
I say SPIDX. They've also historically had references to documentation around package.json, which I made a note of as well. So they might be folks we want to pull in. And then just generally, I think we should be considering what has been done in the web manifest space and what necessarily where there's either alignment or completely, you know, differing information that's going to live in these two types of files. But there, to me, historically, that's, you know, I saw the web manifest standardization effort for web extensions, and this seems like a similar kind of effort. So there might be some learnings that can be pulled out of the group that did that, but I know that was a different kind of vendor. So the browsers got together and did that work. So in this case, we'll probably have to get package managers and runtimes at the table. So
I think the additional challenge is that for anyone who isn't already enthusiastic enough to just show up, they have to be kind of told why they should show up, and they have to be kind of lured in by showing them why it's important to them. And so figuring out the problem space and what problems are being solved is really important, not just to bring everyone to the table, but for any standards body, they're pretty much all going to operate on first, like, why are we talking if you don't know what problem you're solving? And I think Ethan has the right instincts here, that there's stuff here that needs standardization, but until we figured out how to wordsmith it, like, it's just not going to be effective. So I think that's where we're at now, is all trying to figure out ways to phrase probably multiple problem statements and then decide if in fact standardization is the answer for those.
Toby's got their hand up.
Yeah, I kind of want to second that, like, strongly. It feels like it's totally unclear what real value standardizing this would actually provide to the folks who need to be around the table, if this has to have any teeth, right? And so until that is solved, I really don't see that going places, frankly, until there's like real clear value for NPM and Node and like the few real key players in the space.
Any other, Leigh, you had your hand up for just a sec. Any other thoughts or comments on this? It sounds like, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I lowered my hand because Jordan said a lot of the things that I wanted to ask, but basically I was going to ask that what are the use cases, what are the user needs that this is trying to cover? Like, let's standardize package.json is not a use case. I guess an obvious use case is extensibility, standardizing extensibility points. Is there any other, or is that the only reason to standardize it?
Yeah, I don't really know where this is coming from. As a previous the manager of the NPM CLI team, and this was definitely like, maybe there was concern in the ecosystem that some folks are stepping on each other's toes, and so maybe to your point, Leia, it's like, you know, let's codify some keys, common keys, I think is where Ethan's head's at, with trying to make it easier to you know, make sure that there's some common understanding of what values could represent in this manifest. But yeah, it's kind of tough because the ecosystem, pretty much anybody for the last decade, over a decade, 12, 13 years, has use this file in various ways, and I think that there would have to be some effort going into looking at the legacy ecosystem usage to even get started with trying to standardize this, because we might just be
Yeah, it sounds like, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, it sounds like you don't just need buy-in from NPM in that case, you need buy-in from the tool authors that need to extend package.json. Like, if it was standardized, would they follow the new syntax? Because the new syntax is likely going to be more awkward to minimize conflicts. Would they be willing to have that trade-off? Also, are there any other consumers of package.json in addition to NPM, or is NPM like basically the only consumer?
No.
And tools.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. The ecosystem's huge, and yeah, and so like a good example would be the ESLint folks, Nicholas Zakis, like Zakis, you know, has, you know, been a staunch advocate not to sort of like standardize or bundle ES build into runtime or so it's a good example. I think, you know, I've heard him speak about problems with the way that they rolled out configuration, and so codifying, I think, and locking, you know, the ecosystem into standards might, I think, hurt you know, the way that it naturally has evolved to sort of use and change and adapt over time the usage of that file.
Yeah, I didn't phrase my question properly. I'm sorry about that. I'm aware that different tools need to extend package.json to add like different params for configuring these tools. I guess I was just wondering if there are other consumers of package.json as a whole in the same way that NPM does.
I mean, there's Yarn and PNPM, right? So there's all the CLIs that for NPM, but then Node itself reads from package.json, as does Bun and Deno. And then, as you said, like anything in userland that puts configuration in package.json also has to be able to consume it. And there's, you know, there's only a few like standardized ways of reading package.json, and only one or two of those come from NPM. So it's, you know, there are definitely some problems that some forms of partial standardization will solve. And it's just the work ahead of us is, I think, just to phrase that in a way that makes it clear what the problems are. I don't think it will ever be tenable to just be like, this is package.json and anything that doesn't match this is invalid, right? Like, there's going to be a whole lot of like top level keys are almost exclusively going to be a Wild West, except for a few very specific ones that everyone already knows not to touch. And so it would be more like new top level keys could be perhaps added and defined, but in the same way as you kind of have to, when you add a new prototype method, you have to check web compatibility. I feel like if we add any new top level key, you have to just go check ecosystem compatibility. And anytime there's overlap, it's a huge problem. So like there is even just coordinating a centralized place for everyone to coordinate is still, there's still some value there, but that's kind of not, that can't really be the first step. That needs to be like, there needs to be other stuff that's standardized, I think, before people will come to the table and coordinate in that body.
Or potentially standardizing specific structures that different packages can read from without having to go through a process of adding a top level key. Like you could imagine an object with keys as the package names or something where the values would be like objects with various settings that this package reads
Right.
from.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm envisioning, that that there will be a very short finite list of top level keys whose values have strict schemas, but that anything anything outside of that list would probably never be preventable. But we still might be able to if we achieve that for some of the more commonly used keys, then we still might be able to create a world where everybody wants to go check with this centralizing body and say, like, could I maybe standardize my new top level key here? And then everyone else would be paying attention and the conflicts would be mitigated to some degree. But that's like 10 steps ahead of where we are now.
Right. That's exactly what I meant by you need to have buy-ins from the tool authors, because this is going to be far more awkward for them. Like it's much easier to just say, the top level key that is about ESLint, and then we'll just read from that, compared to like you have to like add this structure inside this other structure, and then like it gets more complicated to read. And like if we want a top level key, we have to go through this process. Like you need them to see the value in doing that.
Yeah, completely agree.
I think it was Toby mentioned a document where the like wordsmithing is happening. Can you drop a link to that?
It's in the issue itself at the
it's an
bottom,
issue.
I think.
Cool. Thank you, Darcy.
And it's worth noting that those documentation scattered all over the place about all of this stuff. Plus, there's some schemas already that define a whole bunch of things
that are not
And
even
so-
correct. Like the one that VS Code uses has some issues as well. And
I'm sure,
Yeah.
but like it's the typical sort of like you have 14 standards. We want to standardize those 14 standards, and like next situation now you have 15. Right? You know.
All right. Thank you so much for this summary. I'll also take a look at this document. But it sounds like this is another one that we probably will want to, again, we're kind of just taking this back to brass tacks, take the label off of this issue, but we also want to keep following up on it. So it may just be a like someone check in when they feel like this document is pretty close and come back to the group. Toby's did you have your hand up just now? No. Maybe.
No, we've tried to use a quarterly label in the CPC for this kind of stuff, but I don't know how actually good we are at it.
I check those now and again.
Yeah, so I mean, I know that Joe is good at it. I don't know how the rest of us are. That's what I meant.
Okay. We're also good at just leaving issues open for eternity. So, okay. So we're just a few minutes to the top of the hour. The other items on our list, 170 is related to Toby's PR, so we'll close that. The terms for SME participation is certainly more than a 5-minute conversation, so we will table that. Any other business before we close today? Any requests for topics for next week? So I will ask that question now so that you do not have to remember to open an issue yourself. Table that as $2. Okay, so now we're just like keeping a count of money that owed for idioms. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording and say thank you all for a great meeting. Stop. See you next.